Howdy, Smirk here, and I'm happy to say that I've got friends. Why is that relevant? Well, today I have a couple of them joining me for today's review of ANNO Mutationem. I'm trying something new and figure that this game is pretty extensive and a little complex, so I want to introduce a couple of different perspectives from others with different experiences and format in a way where you're not just listening to multiple people's whole reviews in one video. Let us know what you think, okay? ANNO Mutationem, which I'll just call ANNO for short, was developed by Thinking Stars and published by Lightning Games. The screenshot you see was taken on April 2nd when we started this review, and at that time, this game was sitting at 1,896 reviews in total with a 65% acceptance rate. This means that roughly 1,232 reviews were recommendations and 664 reviews were not. Nowadays, the review numbers are going up with it having a little over 2,000 reviews today, and since a recent content update fixed some of the controversial concerns, we've started to see it trend higher, getting closer to that 70% threshold, which would flip it from mixed into mostly positive. ANNO regularly costs $25 and has an estimated play time of about 12 hours. I completed the game in a little under 14 hours since I was doing some side questing, and another full-time reviewer, Buya, was able to complete all the achievements in just about 14 hours. The game does have an optional collector's edition. If you haven't purchased the base game yet, you can spend an extra $10 to get the collector's edition, which gives you access to an art book, the incomplete original soundtrack, and some in-game goodies such as outfits, weapons, or weapon modifications. If you already have the base game, you can buy the collector's upgrade for $15. Funnily enough, the original soundtrack can only be listened to while the game is open, doesn't contain all the music heard in the game, and provides no separate audio files so you can enjoy the songs outside of the game. So it's recommended if the OST is what you're buying it for, that you instead choose to get the complete downloadable soundtrack separately on Steam for $10. The Steam page is purposely ambiguous about the story elements, so we'll save those for spoiler territory down the road. That's about everything on the Steam store page that we can cover in this section, so we'll move on to this video's first impressionist, Seevee, who talks about how she felt about the game within the first 3 hours of playing it.
ANNO Mutationem, a very compelling game with its intriguing story, interesting gameplay, and amazing voice acting and OST. This action-adventure RPG game is set in a cyberpunk world with a unique mix of 2D and 3D pixelated graphics. You're introduced to your character, Anne Flores, after waking up from someone knocking on her door. She receives a package and opens it, which is a gift from Anne's best friend, Ayane Misuno, for their second-year friendiversary. After the exchange, you go to your computer to read some messages to get your first couple of quests, and the game begins. Something that was super useful was being able to find the next location to move the story along. I used it a lot because I easily get lost and distracted. Another good thing about it is it highlights where items are and hidden things you can collect. I am personally a turn-based type of gamer, so it was difficult for me to get used to platforming and the combat system, but the more you play, the easier it gets. There's a lot of cool combos you can do, and it was just all around a really fun time. There are some fun mini games, and later on you can do side quests. I never realized how bad I am at ping pong. I mean, I really lost to a slow-moving ball. But I really enjoyed bartending. I didn't understand the mechanics at first, but towards the end I finally got it. There were a lot of times I would pause in the game just to listen to the music or enjoy the scene. The game really has a way of setting the tone because of the wonderful mixture of visuals and audio, and the voice acting was great. I definitely felt that each character's voice went with their personalities. Ayane being one of my favorite that I heard.
Ayane? Miss my voice already? Oh, you.
There was a lot that I liked about the game. It's very user-friendly when it comes to finding your next mission or finding items you didn't know you could interact with. The whole atmosphere was phenomenal. The music and scenes match the cyberpunk theme perfectly, and I really loved the pixel 2D and 3D art style. A few small things, I wasn't really sure what I should sell or keep, and something that's not even the game's fault, I kept opening up different menus when I would panic spam buttons in combat. Overall, I think this is a great game. I would recommend people who don't normally play these types of games a try. And who knows, you might like it.
Now that the first impressions and synopsis are all covered, we'll move on to the full-timers. We have two full-timers for Anno. One is my friend Buya, and then myself. We both completed the main storyline of the game, and our reviews cover all of it. I'll sample out our reviews when we overlap on elements we liked or disliked together, and then highlight the unique parts of our reviews separately before heading into the recap of all three of us. Before we get started with the full review section, you may find that some more elements than what can be found on the Steam store page are going to be revealed. These aren't all endgame spoilers, but if learning anything more than what is freely available on the marketing material bothers you, you'll want to skip to the timestamp on the screen. We'll let you know when we're hitting some more story dictating spoilers. For the positives, one thing that we both agreed on was our views on the platform mechanics and level design.
Anno Mutationem has some fun platforming mechanics I wish were implemented more into the game. The level design is pretty straightforward. You are given a waypoint on the map and your goal is to follow it. It felt as if whenever the area switched to 2D combat and platforming, the fights and platforming obstacles could be completed in less than a minute. Then it's on to the next waypoint.
One notable mention here is the platforming. Much later on in the game, there's some really fun platform puzzles that I wish were expanded on or had more difficulty added on because the game's light platforming elements felt really well done. For some unique things that I liked, one thing I made a special note of was the game's art direction. The blend of 2D character models in a 3D world is a stark contrast to one another, but allows the character models to pop separately from the very busy environment that surrounds you. The game runs in a 3D environment until you encounter a battle, in which case the axis simplifies into a flat 2D environment, which I think is a great indicator to separate the exploration and combat phases of the game. The particles are detailed, the animations are fluid, and the game allows you to run it all at 144 Hz for those with some higher end monitors. I do wish the shadowing was consistent. There's some places where shadows are cast in relation to their light sources, but this isn't consistently in use and it's just a little disappointing. To talk a bit about the sound, the music is absolutely on point and is thematic. Boss tracks are all unique and correlate well with their presence and meaning. Boss fights that involve robotics are a little more industrial. Songs with more monstrous enemies are a little more chaotic, and mysterious masked assailants are given songs with uninterpretable lyrics. The voice acting, while only being present for story-related lines, is well casted, delivered expertly, and really completes a character's design. Even if Buya didn't fully agree, he could agree that some assets were worth noticing.
We play as the beautiful Anne Flores, with an exciting soundtrack. The new content drop added more sexy outfits for Anne. Always a plus.
For a unique item that Buya enjoyed, his note was the effort it took to complete the achievements.
One plus side of the game is the achievement list is extremely easy. I was able to get many achievements without thinking about them. I had to look up what some secret achievements were, but other than that, it was easy to find the collectibles and complete the story.
For another unique item that I enjoyed the customization and growth paths of the combat system alongside the combat itself. It's robust and allows for some deviation of how people go through the game. You essentially get the ability to use a light weapon, a heavy weapon, and a ranged weapon with some service level use cases and drawbacks alongside a shield for blocking and parrying. There are skill trees that empower these weapons in addition to some basic body-based attacks that work with any weapon. Then to top it off, there's a chip system that can modify your weapon to increase its stats such as damage, critical rate, or its armor penetration. Then lastly, there's three elements, electric, fire, and ice, that act in a triangle solution to each other. You're able to change these chips out mid-battle, which probably hurts immersion for some, but it didn't bother me at all. All in all, the combat felt smooth and rewarding, albeit a little easy at many times. Telegraphs were notable and made sense, which led to rewarding parries or heartbreaking block breakers. Enemy classifications had distinct performances that kept combat fresh, and combos felt fun to discover and execute because of those previous 2 points. When it comes to things that we found a little less good, Buya and I agreed that certain parts of the story and its universe wore at our patience. Before we dip into these next couple of points, it contains some pretty critical story spoilers, so if this is your off point, go ahead and hop to the timestamp on the screen, which will take you to the recap. Alright, carrying on.
The story of Anno Mutationem is extremely convoluted. For much of the story, the only thing I knew I was doing was searching for Anne's brother Ryan, and that Ryan was searching for a cure for Anne's entanglitis. Entanglitis is a disease in Anno Mutationem that only Anne has. There are multiple datapads and computers that further explain the world and setting of Anno Mutationem, but by the time I got to the climax of the game, I no longer felt the need to read every damn datapad. I just wanted to finish the game and be done with it.
The game introduces dozens of characters, but only provides backstory for a select few. I'd say you don't know much about well over 3/4 of the named characters, including their motivations and aspirations, which undermines their purpose and the plot overall. For some of these cast members, you don't even know why they're here at all, like Melissa and Castor. Like, yeah, Castor wants something from Hinterland, but so does pretty much everybody else in this game. But why? Or take this unknown child you fight in an alternative universe, timeline, dream sequence thing. It's not really clear how Anne ends up here or where we even are. I can't think of a single character aside from Anne or Ayane that I felt I learned enough about, which makes it hard to love a game if you don't really find yourself into the stoicism of Anne or the eccentricities of Ayane. There's just too many flat characters because this game hadn't painted them with enough depth. Now, I have to defend myself for a second here, because there's a chance that you learn about any of the characters I've talked about. I have 13 pages of notes, things I like, things I dislike, and important story points so I could try and reference them as I compose this review. But there's so much to follow and so many lore pieces that don't add anything to the main story arc that it's hard to tell what's worth remembering and what's something that can be afforded the luxury of forgetting. When you care a lot about world building, there's a delicate balance that needs to be stricken so that your players have enough ground to walk on and enough water to drink without there being too much or too little of both. And unfortunately, this bit felt really drowning to me. When it came to something that we didn't agree upon, Buya didn't appreciate the new updated ending that came out in response to the controversial original ending.
The new conclusion to the story didn't quite do it for me. It was still lackluster, but more enjoyable than the original. The delivery felt weaker, but I think it would have benefited from adding voice acting. But I'm guessing since the game was completed before this new ending came out, it just wasn't an option. I definitely found more closure for the story, but it still leaves much to be desired.
Meanwhile, this was my take on it. The ending was originally one of my negative points. I actually felt it was the worst part of the game and was the heaviest thing weighing against favorability. On April 22nd, Thinking Stars put down a new ending that was leagues better than its former. It introduces a decision, features new cutscenes and dialogue, and a much more appropriate ending that is overall a lot more redeeming. While this ending introduces its own, much more minor flaws in my opinion, it is a much more satisfying ending that doesn't diminish the player's experience or the primary cast of characters' journey and growth. In the original ending, G, a consortium, don't worry about them for now, scientist partially responsible for the story events threatens Anne to put on a collar that allows them to limit and control her abilities. This threat is only by the scientist and 2 trash mobs that will shoot Ryan, her brother, and herself. Regardless that Anne could have easily defeated all 3 of them, she puts on the collar without hesitation, and her best friend Ayane, and Ryan all have their memories wiped, which was at the cause of an extremely brash and uncharacteristic decision by our main protagonist. In the new ending, G explains more of his reasoning as to why the collar may be the best option for everyone. And as a player, we're able to make a better, more educated decision to put this collar on or to refuse. Remember, this choice wasn't present in the previous version at all, and I feel like at the very least, the sudden grim ending would have been easier to swallow if we were allowed to consider the risks and make a choice instead of the game making one for us. But this ending is much more worth it. It has callbacks to specific story elements that spark joy, it caps off some of the growth that Anne had undergone throughout her journey, sets up for a potential sequel in a promising universe, and fulfills on some promises that I'm sure some fans are happy to see. When I originally wrote about what I had hoped to see from Anno's ending when I was upset at how it originally ended, I was hoping for a heroic obstacle where Anne would have to overcome Amok, a spirit from Hinterland that's trying to corrupt her and bring destruction to her realm. While the battle with Amok was introduced, Amok was really easy to beat, and that's the only real reservation I have about it. Make Amok, Nidhogg, and C into formidable, challenging opponents, and this conclusion would have fulfilled all of my wishes. Those are about all the notable things that I think we can share, so we'll move on to the total recap. To highlight this game's strengths, we are all in unanimous agreement that the game's art direction is its strongest asset. For the first impressionists, they enjoyed the combat and helpful UI of the game. For us full-timers, we both enjoyed the little bit of platform puzzling the game offered, but only one of us had enjoyed the combat and how easy it was to complete all of the game's achievements. Meanwhile, only one of us was happy with the new ending. To consider this game's weaknesses, there wasn't anything unanimously disagreed upon by all of us. Our first impressionists only disliked how some of the menus felt nested and how they couldn't easily differentiate between what should be sold or kept. For us full-timers, we unanimously got tired of some of the world-building elements since they're all packed so tightly together in the same act. One of us had found the growing cast of characters incredibly exhausting, while the other found the story at large uninteresting. As for recommendations, our first impressionist Seevee recommends this game. Buya does not recommend the game. For myself, I do recommend the game, and as a numerical score, I'd give this game a 6 out of 10. It's closer to a 7 than a 5. I can see how this game is controversially reviewed. There's clearly some good in it, but it also carries some very distinct flaws. I can see how some people might be able to look past those flaws though, depending on how much or little they care for the story. The developer seems to be willing to try and incorporate some of the community's feedback, and I think that's great, and so far they've done a pretty good job, so I'm excited to see where they go. Alright, that's all we've got. Like I said, this was a new video type. Let me know what you thought. Like the video if you liked the video, feel free to comment your thoughts, especially on anything about this new format I'm testing. It's not the way every Redlight will be in case that's something you're wanting to know. We've learned some things, so hopefully the next one we do is better, but your feedback's important too. If you want to see more, hit subscribe to see my future content. Lastly, feel free to slap that bell's thick ass if you want to receive notifications for future videos.
Hi, Bad Mike Smirk here. For today's stinger, I just wanted to share some of Buya's timestamps and notes he sent me because I thought they were funnier than anything I could come up with. There's spoilers in it, so stop the video. Wake up, hella sexy. Anne's boobs keep moving up and down. Wake up, hella sexy. Again, Kylo Ren enters the battle. Did they really have to fence on a table? Masked lady takes off her mask like we're supposed to know who the fuck she is.